AITA for driving my girlfriend to her ex's house just to watch her get rejected? My name is Connor. My relationship with Haley lasted 8 months. It was not a particularly long story. Yet, for a good part of that time, I really believed it was serious. When we started dating, Haley was not at all the person she became in the end. I met her at a party with mutual friends. She was one of those girls who catch your eye without even trying. There was something natural about her presence, a kind of calm that captivated effortlessly. She spoke in a steady voice, really listened to what you told her, and always seemed to have an interesting thought to share. During the first few weeks, everything was simple with her. We went for walks in the neighborhood. We went out to dinner at local spots. We watched movies cuddled up on the couch. Nothing extraordinary, but everything was pleasant, sweet, almost obvious. Haley gave the impression of being a caring person. She had little gestures that made the relationship feel balanced. Like if I cooked dinner one night, she would naturally offer to do the dishes. If I came home tired from work, she was the one who suggested ordering takeout instead of going out. During the first few months, we did not have any serious arguments. It was peaceful. After 4 months, we started spending even more time together. The idea of living under the same roof eventually came up quite naturally. We made this decision almost without thinking about it, as a given. I had a 1-bedroom apartment that was big enough for 2, and she was tired of sharing a place with 2 noisy roommates who came home late and made a lot of noise. In hindsight, it was probably too soon, but at the time it seemed logical. We got along well. We were already spending nearly every night together, and we thought living together would just be a simple extension of what we were already experiencing. During the first month of living together, everything remained relatively calm. There were the usual little adjustments, things any couple experiences when they start sharing their daily lives. Learning each other's rhythms, organizing the space, dividing up certain chores. Nothing dramatic at first, but little by little, problems that did not exist before began to appear. The first arguments broke out over trivial things, everyday details that in theory should never have blown up like that. One night, for example, she asked me to take out the trash before going to bed. I replied that I would do it the next morning because I was already in my pajamas and really exhausted. Her reaction was much sharper than I would have imagined. She did not yell, but her tone hardened suddenly. She said that if we were living together, I needed to be more responsible with the house. I calmly replied that I had no problem doing it, but that I preferred taking care of it in the morning. This kind of petty argument started happening more and more often. Another time, we clashed because I had left a glass on the coffee table after drinking some water. When I came back a few minutes later to put it away, Haley was already upset. At first, I thought she was just having a hard time adjusting to living together. Living with someone always requires an adjustment period. So, I tried to be patient. But the arguments kept piling up. In just a few weeks, we had more conflicts than during the entire rest of our relationship. One afternoon, while we were talking about dividing up the household chores, something happened that marked a decisive turning point in our dynamic. I offered her a pretty simple solution, dividing the responsibilities equally. Nothing complicated. I could take care of certain things, she could handle others, or we could even alternate. Haley did not agree. I remember she was sitting on the couch when she answered in a harsher voice than usual. I am not going to clean the house as if I were someone's maid. Her tone surprised me. I replied that this was absolutely not what I was proposing. I did not expect her to do everything. On the contrary, I was specifically suggesting that we share so that everyone contributes. But Haley seemed to see things differently. You are the one who should do it, she insisted. A woman deserves to be treated properly simply because she is a woman. This sentence caught me off guard. Not because I thought people should not be treated properly, but because she was using it as an argument for me to handle all the cleaning by myself. I tried to stay calm. I explained to her that treating someone properly did not mean taking on all the responsibilities of a shared household. For me, it also involved mutual respect and genuine collaboration. But she did not seem interested in that point of view. The conversation became increasingly tense. In the middle of the argument, Haley started bringing up her ex-boyfriend. At first, it was indirectly. My ex, he knew how to treat a woman. I did not answer right away. A lot of people mention their past relationships during an argument, even if it is not a good idea, but she kept going. He never asked me to do household chores. Then she added something that made me look up. He always made sure I was comfortable. The discussion quickly stopped being about household chores and turned into a constant comparison with this man. Over the next few days, the subject of the ex came up several times. Every time we argued about something, Haley found a way to mention him. My ex would have done this. My ex did not argue over trivial things. My ex knows how to treat a woman. At first, I tried to ignore it. I told myself she was speaking out of anger without really thinking. But over time, it started looking less like impulsive words and more like deliberate provocation. One night, the argument took on an unusual scale. It all started with an insignificant detail. The kitchen was a mess after dinner. I had cooked, and I simply asked her to help me clean up. Haley crossed her arms. I am not your maid. I reminded her that I had prepared the meal that evening and that I was just asking for a hand to put everything back in order. That was when she dropped a sentence that completely changed the atmosphere. That is why my ex was better than you. A heavy silence fell. I asked her what she meant exactly. She did not hesitate for a second. He was better at everything. And then she added with a cold look, in every way possible. At that moment, I understood that this was no longer a simple argument. It was a direct attempt to hurt me deeply. I looked at her for a few seconds without saying a word. She was not yelling, was not raising her voice, but every word seemed chosen to wound me. Finally, she snapped. Maybe I should go back to him. I thought it was another provocation, but she continued. Yes, that is what I am going to do. I am going to leave with him. At least he knew how to treat a woman properly. At that precise moment, something inside me turned off. If someone sincerely thinks their ex is better at everything, even after several months in a new relationship, then that person was probably never really committed to the current relationship. So, I answered something she clearly did not expect. I told her that it was fine, that if she really thought her ex was better, she could leave with him. Haley frowned to figure out if I was serious. What do you mean? I mean I can even drive you there myself, I replied calmly. The expression on her face changed instantly. She obviously had not imagined that I would accept her idea so easily. I was not speaking seriously, she threw out at first. But very quickly, her tone hardened again. Well, maybe I should do it. I replied that I had no problem with that. If she really wanted to go to his place, she could. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Haley got up abruptly from the couch, went into the bedroom, and started taking her clothes out of the closet. I could hear drawers opening, things being thrown into a suitcase. When she came back to the living room, she was holding a half-full suitcase. She seemed both angry and determined. Yet, when she looked at the clock on the wall, she hesitated. It is 10 p.m., she said. We will do this tomorrow. I shook my head. No. She looked at me in surprise. What do you mean? No. I calmly told her that if she really wanted to leave to join her ex after everything she had said, then she could do it right now. Haley crossed her arms once again. Tomorrow, it will be easier. But I had already made my decision. I told her she had two options. Either she left right now to seek out this man she found so perfect, or she would find herself without a place to stay. Because after everything she had just thrown at me, I had no intention of continuing to live with someone who spoke to me that way. Silence fell in the room. Haley stared at me for several seconds. Then she took a deep breath and finally said, Fine. She snapped the suitcase shut. Take me to his place. I started the car without adding a word. Haley settled into the passenger seat, the suitcase between her legs. During the first few minutes of the drive, neither of us opened our mouths. The atmosphere in the car was heavy, tense, as if we were both waiting for the other to say something that could still change everything. But no one spoke. After a few minutes, Haley broke the silence. Turn right at the next street, she said in a sharp voice. I nodded and kept driving. The place she was guiding me to was not very far. In reality, it was only about 15 minutes away from the apartment. While we were driving through the nearly empty streets at that hour, I noticed Haley starting to look at her phone. First, she unlocked the screen, searched for a contact, and then pressed call. She pressed the phone against her ear. A few seconds passed without an answer. She frowned and tried again. This time, she let it ring longer. Still nothing. I did not say anything, but I saw her posture change. She no longer looked as sure of herself as when she had left the apartment with her suitcase. She tried a third time. Nothing. He must be busy, she muttered, more to herself than to me. I did not answer. For the rest of the trip, she kept staring at her phone with a certain growing anxiety. It is the next building, she finally said. The one with the bright lights at the entrance. I slowed down and parked in front of the apartment complex. It was a completely ordinary 3-story building, a few windows still lit, and a security gate with an intercom. I turned off the engine. Haley stayed seated for a moment, looking at the building. Maybe he is sleeping, she whispered. Then she called again. The phone rang once more with no answer. Her breathing quickened. I am going to ring the intercom, she finally said. She grabbed her suitcase, opened the door, and got out. I got out too, but I stayed near the car, leaning against the door. Haley walked over to the building's gate and pressed the buzzer for the corresponding apartment. She waited. Nothing. She rang again, longer this time. A few seconds passed. Then we heard a noise inside, like someone coming down the stairs. A moment later, the door opened. A man appeared on the threshold. He was of average height with dark hair and a clearly confused expression. He was wearing a simple t-shirt and sweatpants, like someone who had just been woken up or was getting ready to go to bed. He first looked at Haley, then at me, and finally at her again. What are you doing here, Haley, at this hour? He asked. Haley changed her expression almost instantly. Until now, she had seemed tense, but now her face displayed a mix of sadness and desperation that seemed almost calculated. Her eyes filled with tears in the blink of an eye. Dylan, she said in a trembling voice. She took a step toward him. My love, he kicked me out. Dylan blinked several times, visibly surprised. Haley continued before he could answer. I did not know where else to go, she went on, crying. You have always been better than him. You always knew how to treat me right. Please, help me. She moved even closer. Let me stay with you. I know you live alone. I can keep you company. The silence that followed was extremely awkward. Dylan observed her for a few seconds, then took a small step back. His expression went from confusion to something colder. No. Haley blinked. What? Dylan shook his head. No. I will never get back together with you. Haley's tears began to flow more heavily. Dylan, please, she repeated. No, he insisted firmly. Haley started crying more visibly, covering her face for a moment. I have nowhere to go, she said between sobs. Dylan sighed, clearly uncomfortable. Well, you should have thought of that before. That was when I stepped in calmly. She said she wanted to come. Dylan turned his head toward me for the first time with real attention. And you? Who are you? Connor. Her boyfriend. Dylan let out a small, incredulous laugh. You brought her here? She said she wanted to get back together with you. Haley raised her head quickly. Do not say it like that. But Dylan was already looking at me with a mix of surprise and annoyance. You really drove her to my place? Yes, I answered. It was her idea. Dylan ran a hand over his face. This is ridiculous. Then he looked at Haley. You told him you wanted to get back together with me? Haley tried to answer, but only a sob came out. Dylan sighed again. It is exactly like before. It is not the same, she said quickly, but Dylan was already continuing. Do you know why we broke up? He asked me. I shook my head. Because she was always doing the exact same thing. Haley shook her head. Do not start with that. But Dylan went on. She compared everything. He looked right at me. She always used to say that her previous partner was better. I felt a little sting of irony in the situation. How curious, I said. Dylan frowned. Why? Because she did the exact same thing with me. Haley shot me a furious look. That is not true, but I kept going. An hour ago, she was telling me that you were better than me in every aspect of the relationship. Dylan stayed quiet for a few seconds, then let out a dry laugh. Of course she did. Haley raised her voice. It was not like that. Oh really? I said. We were in the middle of an argument. Dylan slowly shook his head. Connor, right? I nodded. I'm going to give you a piece of advice. Haley started crying again. Do not tell him anything. But Dylan ignored her. Leave her. The words dropped with absolute clarity. What? She asked. Leave her, he repeated. This kind of behavior is not healthy. Haley widened her eyes in rage. Do not call me that. Dylan threw up his hands. Look at yourself. You are here at 10 p.m. crying at my door after spending months saying that your boyfriend is awful. Haley started talking very fast. Because he mistreated me. He mistreated you? I repeated. She ignored me and addressed Dylan again. You were different. Dylan let out another incredulous laugh. A year ago, you were saying the exact same thing about me. Silence fell between us again. Haley was breathing heavily. Dylan, Please, just let me stay tonight. Dylan immediately shook his head. No, I have nowhere to go. That is not my problem. Then Haley turned to me. Connor, please. I looked at her without saying anything. We can talk, she went on. I was just angry. I did not mean what I said. Dylan chimed in again. You see? The exact same thing. Haley was getting more and more desperate. Connor, we can fix this. Then she turned to Dylan. You, please, just let me stay tonight. Neither of us answered. The silence grew heavier and heavier. Finally, I took a deep breath. I think everything is clear now. Haley looked at me in despair. Connor. But I was already heading toward the car. Connor, wait. I did not stop. I heard her footsteps behind me. Connor, please. I opened the car door and got behind the wheel. She arrived just as I was closing the door. Do not leave me here. Dylan remained standing at the building's entrance, watching the scene in silence. I started the engine. Haley knocked on the window with her hand. Connor. I did not answer. We can fix this. I looked straight ahead. Dylan finally spoke from the door. I told you to leave her. I did not answer anymore. I simply shifted into drive. The car began to move forward slowly. In the rearview mirror, I saw Haley left standing on the sidewalk, her suitcase next to her, crying. Dylan watched the scene for a few more seconds, then shook his head. Without another word, he went back inside the building and closed the door. The last image I saw before turning the corner was Haley, alone on the sidewalk under the bright light of the building's entrance. That night, I slept much better than I would have thought. I do not say that with pride, nor with coldness. It is simply what happened. After everything that had just happened, I only felt an immense mental exhaustion, as if the argument had drained whatever energy was still left in our relationship. When I got back to the apartment, the first thing that struck me was the silence. Haley's suitcase was no longer there, obviously. A few of her things were still lying around the house, but at the time, I did not worry about it. I simply took a shower, turned off the lights, and went to bed. For a moment, I thought back on everything that had happened over the last few hours. The argument, the suitcase, the silent drive, the scene in front of Dylan's place, and finally her alone on the sidewalk. Yet, the only thing I felt was the confirmation of something that had been brewing for several weeks. Our relationship was broken long before that night. That evening had only made things definitively clear. The next morning, I woke up early. I made some coffee and looked at my phone. There were no messages or missed calls, which did not really surprise me. A few hours passed. I was checking my emails when my phone started ringing. It was Haley's number. For a moment, I considered not answering, but I ended up picking up. Hello. The answer came immediately, loaded with anger. You are heartless. I recognized her voice right away. I had to sleep in the park because of you. I stayed silent for a few seconds. You slept in the park? Yes, she repeated furiously. Her voice was full of indignation. Do you know what that is like? I did not answer. She continued, more and more agitated. Ants crawled all over me while I was sleeping. She breathed heavily before continuing. Some guy even gave me $1 because he thought I was homeless. There was a short silence after that sentence, as if she were waiting for a specific reaction. Maybe an apology, maybe some guilt. Instead, I could not help but laugh a little. It was not a big burst of laughter, just a brief, incredulous laugh. Does that make you laugh? She snapped immediately. A little. Yes. Her breathing grew heavier on the other end of the line. You are unbelievable. So, I replied calmly. But wait, did you not say your ex knew how to treat a woman? Silence. What? You also said he was better than me. I continued in the same quiet tone. That you were going back to him. Haley did not answer right away. Honestly, I went on. I was expecting the wedding invitation soon. There was a second of absolute silence. Then she exploded. I hate you. The scream was so loud that I had to pull the phone slightly away from my ear. You are the worst person I have ever met. I did not answer. This is all your fault. You left me there. No, I finally replied. You are the one who wanted to go there. She started talking again, but I did not let her continue. I simply hung up. For a few seconds, I looked at the phone screen. Then I went into my contacts. I blocked her number. Next, I opened my messaging apps and social media. One by one, I blocked her everywhere. I did not do it out of anger or drama, but rather with a feeling of closure. Some people think that after a breakup, you need long conversations, final explanations, or some kind of emotional closure. But the truth is, real closure often happens well before that. In our case, it was already there the night before, outside Dylan's building. Over the next few days, I gathered the few belongings Haley still had lying around the apartment and packed them into a box. I handed them over to a mutual friend to pass along to her. We never spoke directly again. In reality, the last thing I heard about her was several weeks later, still through that mutual friend. He told me that Haley had ended up moving in with one of her friends. Apparently, she had gone back to living with her, just like before we started dating. I did not ask many questions. The truth is, I had no desire to know anymore. Sometimes, relationships end with great betrayals. Other times, they end simply because two people are not compatible, and sometimes they shatter because someone spends all their time constantly comparing the present with the past, until they finally find themselves alone with that past. In my case, the story was quite straightforward. My girlfriend had said she was going to leave with her ex because he, at least, knew how to treat a woman. So, I took her to his place, and he was the first one to tell her to get lost. Comment: I wanted to share a few thoughts with you. Self-respect should always come first in any relationship. When someone repeatedly crosses your boundaries, it's okay to choose yourself and step away with dignity. Walking away from constant disrespect is actually an act of self-love. Real healing begins the moment we stop accepting treatment we don't deserve. You deserve relationships that bring you peace and genuine kindness. Choosing calm over drama may feel hard at first, but it opens the door to much better things. Take time to reflect on what you truly want and need from your connections with others. Always be kind to yourself first, especially after difficult experiences. I hope these thoughts stay with you and help you build healthier, happier relationships moving forward. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.